I thought Christmas dinner was where he would finally apologize, but instead, he slid the divorce papers across the table like a tip. The entire room laughed when my card got declined. That was until the waiter went pale, whispered into his sleeve, and locked eyes with me. 10 minutes later, his family stopped smiling because the restaurant was not serving dinner anymore. It was serving consequences. My name is Tessa Whitaker, and at 34 years old, I was still naive enough to believe in Christmas miracles. The biting wind off the water in Old Harbor stung my cheeks, but I barely felt it as I pushed open the heavy oak doors of Lacine, the most pretentious dining establishment in the city of Grayford. I was here for a second chance, or so I thought. Gavin stood up as I approached the table. My husband looked dashing in his charcoal suit, the one I had picked out for him last year. He smiled, a tight, practiced expression that did not reach his eyes, and pulled out my chair. "You made it," he said, his voice smooth like polished glass. I went ahead and ordered the truffle risotto. Your favorite? It was a performance. I realized that the moment I sat down. Across the white linen tablecloth, my mother-in-law, Dahlia Locke, and my sister-in-law, Bianca, sipped their champagne with precise, synchronized sips. It is so important to have the right people at the table for the holidays, Dahlia murmured, her eyes flicking over my off-the-rack dress. People who understand the weight of our legacy? Bianca giggled behind her crystal flute. Legacy is something you are born with. Mother, not something you can marry into. I stiffened, gripping the napkin in my lap. I was about to reach for Gavin's hand to find some anchor in this storm of passive aggression when he placed a thick manila envelope on the table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding between the centerpiece and my empty wine glass. "Sign it," Gavin said. The warmth was gone from his voice, replaced by a flat, bored tone. "Clean divorce. Do not make it hard during the holidays." My breath hitched. The ambient noise of the restaurant, the clinking silverware, the soft jazz, the laughter seemed to vanish. "Gavin, I thought we were here to talk about us." "We are," he replied, not looking at me. He was looking past me, at his mother for approval. Dahlia set her glass down, the stem hitting the table hard enough to ring. "Oh, honestly, Tessa," she said, her voice rising just enough to carry to the neighboring tables. "You came into this family with absolutely nothing. 2 empty hands and a sob story about foster care. Now you are leaving exactly the same way. We are just correcting a clerical error." Heat rushed up my neck. I could feel the eyes of the other patrons boring into my back. The shame was physical, a hot weight in my chest. But I had survived worse than snobby in-laws. I had survived a childhood where hunger was a constant companion. I would not let them see me break. "Fine," I said, my voice trembling only slightly. I reached into my purse. "I will not eat your food. I will pay for my own seat, and then I will leave. Save your pennies, dear," Bianca sneered. "You are going to need them for the bus fare." I ignored her and pulled out my card case. I slapped my debit card onto the small silver tray the waiter had left. I needed to get out of there before the tears actually fell. The waiter returned a moment later. He looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am." The card was declined. Dahlia let out a sharp, barking laugh. Bianca joined in, a cruel, high-pitched sound. The table of real estate investors next to us chuckled along. It felt like the whole world was in on the joke. "Try this one," I said, panic rising in my throat. I dug deeper into my wallet and my fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled it out. It was not a bank card. It was a heavy, slate-gray rectangle with a thin, gold line engraved down the center, a longitude line. The only thing I had left from a past I barely knew. I handed it to the waiter. His name tag read, Evan. Evan looked at the card. He froze. The polite customer service mask dropped from his face, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. He looked at the card, then up at me. his eyes wide. Evan stammered. I. One moment. He did not walk away. He practically ran. Look at that, Gavin scoffed, shaking his head. You are embarrassing yourself. Even the staff cannot stand to look at you. But 30 seconds later, the atmosphere shifted. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier. Evan was back, but he was not alone. The restaurant manager was with him, looking pale and sweating. Behind them were 2 large security guards and a man in an immaculate dark suit who moved with the lethal grace of a predator. They stopped at our table. They did not look at Gavin. They did not look at Dahlia. They were looking only at me. Gavin did not notice the shift yet. He leaned in close to my ear, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and betrayal. You have nothing. Tessa, he whispered, his voice dripping with venom. Sign the papers and disappear. No one will ever believe you were even here. You have nothing. That phrase echoed in my head, bouncing off the walls of my memory. It was the same thing I had told myself every night in the group home when I was 10 years old. Growing up in the foster system teaches you one fundamental truth, which is that you are temporary. You occupy a bed until someone else needs it more. I spent my entire life building a fortress against that feeling. I worked double shifts, put myself through college, and landed a senior position at Kestrel Risk Analytics. I was good at predicting disaster for insurance companies. How had I missed the catastrophe sitting across the breakfast table from me for 3 years? I looked at Gavin. I remembered the day we met. I had just gotten my first real paycheck. He bumped into me at the coffee shop near my office, spilling his latte. He was charming, persistent, and exactly what a lonely girl who had just clawed her way out of poverty wanted to see. He did not care about my background, or so he said. But looking back now, the red flags were waving violently. The late-night questions that seemed like intimacy but were actually interrogations. Does your biological mother have any papers left? He would ask while stroking my hair. Did anyone in your family ever work in finance? I thought he was just interested in me. Then came the memory of Dahlia. 6 months after the wedding, she had offered to keep my small box of treasures in her climate-controlled safe. Paper rots. Tessa, she had said with a smile that I mistook for maternal warmth. I gave her everything. My mother's letters, a few grainy photos, and that strange, heavy metal card I had found in my mother's old coat pocket. I never knew what it was, but Dahlia had looked at it with a strange hunger. And the agreement. The post-nuptial agreement Gavin slid across the counter one morning while making pancakes. It is just a formality. Babe, he had said. Mom is breathing down my neck about the estate. Sign it, and she stops nagging us. I signed it because I wanted peace. I signed it because I trusted him. My hands trembled as I pulled my phone out under the table. I needed to transfer money. I needed an escape route. I tapped the banking app icon. Invalid credentials. My stomach dropped. I tried again. Account locked. I switched to my email. Password changed 12 minutes ago. The blood drained from my face. They were not just divorcing me. They were deleting me. They had timed this perfectly. On a Friday night before a holiday, when every support line was closed, Dahlia took a sip of her wine, watching my panic with the cold detachment of a scientist observing a lab rat. She leaned toward Bianca. I told you, Dahlia said, her voice low but perfectly audible. Rootless girls are easy to train. They are so used to losing everything that they just accept it when you take the rest. The cruelty of it took my breath away. It was not just an insult. It was a diagnosis of my trauma, weaponized against me. They had picked me not in spite of my background, but because of it, because they thought I would go quietly into the night like I had done so many times before. I was about to scream, to flip the table, to do something desperate when a shadow fell over us. It was Evan, the waiter, but the nervous young man who had taken our order was gone. He stood straighter now, His movements were precise. He placed a fresh linen napkin on the table in front of me, obscuring Gavin's view of my hands. Under the napkin, he slid the metal card back to me. His fingers brushed mine, cold and steady. "Do not sign anything," Evan whispered, his lips barely moving. "Excuse me," Gavin snapped, looking up. "We did not ask for water service, sir," Evan interrupted smoothly, his voice dropping an octave. He looked at me, and for a second, the facade of the service industry vanished. His eyes were intense, urgent. "Keep the card visible. Mrs. Whitaker, and do not sign that paper." Evan turned and walked away before Gavin could protest. I looked down at the divorce papers. I looked at the pen Gavin had placed next to them. Then I looked at the phone in my lap, which was now nothing more than a glass brick. This was not a breakup. This was an ambush. They had lured me here to strip me of my name, my money, and my dignity in one public stroke. They wanted a show. They wanted the poor foster girl to cry and beg so they could feel powerful. But as I touched the cold metal of the card Evan had returned, something inside me shifted. The fear that had defined my life began to curdle into something else, something hot and sharp. I was not going to sign. I was going to fight. The manager did not even have the decency to look me in the eye when he asked me to leave. "Ms. Whitaker, you are disturbing the other guests," he said, gesturing toward the door with a stiff hand. "I have not raised my voice," I argued, though my throat felt tight. "I am just sitting here." "Please," he insisted, signaling to the security guard. I looked back at the table one last time. Gavin was pouring more wine into his mother's glass. He did not look up. He had already discarded me. I turned and walked out, the heavy doors shutting behind me with a finality that felt like a prison sentence. Outside, the winter air was biting. I pulled my phone out to call a ride, but the app flashed red. "Payment method invalid." I tried another app. "Account suspended due to suspicious activity." I tried to book a room at the budget motel 3 blocks away. Card declined. I stood on the sidewalk, shivering in my thin dress, and realized the terrifying scope of their trap. They had not just cut me off. They had erected an invisible electric fence around my life. They knew I had no family to call, no safety net to catch me. I was alone in a city that required money to breathe. I started walking. I headed toward the old Union Station, not because I had a ticket, but because it was the only place open 24 hours where I might find a corner to sit without being chased away. The wind cut through my coat, stinging my eyes. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of fear and adrenaline. I felt like a fugitive running from a crime I did not commit. The station was a cavern of echoing footsteps and cold shadows. In the corner of the waiting area, huddled under a thin blanket, sat an old man. He was shaking violently, not from the cold, I realized, but from something internal. I recognized the tremors. His blood sugar was crashing. I checked my purse. I had half a protein bar left from lunch. It was my breakfast for tomorrow, but I knelt beside him without thinking. The reflex to share was burned into me from years of going hungry. "Sir," I whispered, "here. Eat this." He looked up. His eyes were milky with cataracts, but there was a sharpness behind them. He took the bar with trembling hands and ate it slowly. I opened my water bottle and helped him drink. After a few minutes, the shaking subsided. He looked at me, really looked at me, and then reached into the pocket of his tattered coat. He pulled out a small, heavy object and pressed it into my palm. "I do not need money," I said softly. "Please, keep it. It is not money," the old man rasped. His voice was like grinding stones. "Take it." I opened my hand. It was a heavy gold token, no larger than a quarter, but thick. On one side, it bore the same thin longitude line etched into the metal card I carried. He gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "Do not sell it, no matter how desperate you are. It is not currency. It is a door. Before I could ask what he meant, a group of loud commuters flooded the hall. When I looked back, the old man was gathering his blanket and shuffling away into the crowd, disappearing like smoke. I sat on the hard bench and pulled out the metal card Evan had returned to me. I tilted it under the flickering station lights. For the first time, I noticed faint, worn lettering on the back, almost rubbed smooth by time. Meridian. My phone buzzed. I jumped. It was 5 minutes past midnight. An email notification lit up the cracked screen. The sender was anonymous. Beneficiary confirmation, Tessa Whitaker. 9 in the morning. Harrington Meridian. Legal annex. Be on time. My breath caught in my throat. My first instinct was to delete it. It had to be a scam. Or worse, another trap set by Gavin to humiliate me further. But then I remembered Evan's face, the sheer terror in his eyes when he saw the card, and his warning, do not sign anything. The pieces were floating in the air, disjointed but undeniable. The waiter, the card, the old man, the token, and now, the email. I gripped the phone tight. If I stayed here, freezing on a bench, I was just a victim. I was the poor foster girl who got crushed by the rich family, exactly as Dahlia predicted. But if I went to this address, I stood up. My legs were tired, but my resolve was hardening like steel in the cold. I would go. If they wanted to write the end of my story, they were going to have to fight me for the pen. Financial Row was a canyon of glass and steel, imposing and utterly indifferent to the human lives scurrying at its feet. I walked into the lobby of the Harrington Meridian building at exactly 9 in the morning. The air inside was recycled and smelled faintly of ozone and expensive cologne. I approached the front desk, my heart hammering against my ribs, before I could open my mouth to speak. The receptionist looked up. She did not ask for my ID. She did not ask for my name. She simply pressed a button on her console. Elevator 4, she said, her voice devoid of inflection. 42nd floor. They are expecting you. The elevator ride was smooth and silent, the kind that made your ears pop without you realizing you were moving. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a reception area that looked more like a fortress than an office. A man was waiting for me. He was in his 40s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my annual salary at Kestrel. Ms. Whitaker, he said. It was not a question. I am Rowan Pierce. Please, come with me. He led me into a conference room with a view of the entire city. The harbor where I had been humiliated the night before looked like a dirty puddle from up here. Rowan sat at the head of a long mahogany table and gestured for me to sit. Place the token and the card on the table. Please, he requested. I hesitated, then did as he asked. The heavy gold coin and the scratched metal card made a sharp clack against the wood. Rowan picked up the token with a gloved hand. You met a man at the train station last night. You gave him food. You showed him kindness when he offered you nothing. He was sick, I said defensively. He was having a hypoglycemic episode. He was testing you, Rowan corrected, his eyes locking onto mine. That man was Everett Meridian, the founder of the Meridian Continuity Group. His personal net worth is estimated at $1.2 trillion. I let out a short, incredulous laugh. That is insane. He was wearing rags. He was freezing. Mr. Meridian walks the city anonymously once a year, Rowan said, his face remaining stone cold. To see if the city still has a soul. You were the only one who stopped. He slid a folder across the table. I opened it. On top was a photograph, aged and slightly yellowed. It showed a young woman laughing, holding a baby. Around her neck was a pendant with the exact same longitude line symbol as the token. That is my mother, I whispered, my throat tightening. Calla Monroe. Calla was Everett's estranged daughter, Rowan explained. You are his direct granddaughter. Tessa! I stared at the photo, my mind reeling. But Rowan was not done. He flipped the page to reveal a photocopy of a receipt. It was a pawnshop slip from 2 years ago. The item listed was gold pendant, Meridian insignia. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable. Dahlia Locke. I felt the blood drain from my face. She told me she was keeping it safe. She told me it was in her vault. She pawned it for $400, Rowan said, his voice dripping with professional disdain. But she kept the ticket. She knew what it was. The Locks have known who you are for a long time, Tessa. They were just waiting for the right moment to cash you in. Why the divorce, I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and grief. Why now? Because the Meridian Trust has an age trigger. It activates when the beneficiary turns 35. Your birthday is next week, is it not? Rowan tapped the table. They needed you to sign a divorce settlement that admits to mental instability and waives your rights to future assets. If you are declared incompetent, legal guardianship falls to your next of kin or your former spouse, if the paperwork is structured correctly. They wanted to control the fortune by controlling you. I felt sick. The love, the marriage, the family dinners, it was all just a long con, a heist in slow motion. Rowan reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek, black smartphone. Throw your old phone in the trash. They have been mirroring your device for months. This one is encrypted. I have rerouted your number to this device. As if on cue. The new phone buzzed in my hand. The screen flashed Gavin. Rowan nodded at me. Answer it. I tapped the screen and put it to my ear. Tessa Gavin's voice came through, thick with performative concern. Babe, are you okay? I have been so worried. Look, I know last night was harsh. Mom was just... You know how she gets... I want to help you. I can get you a studio apartment. Pay the rent for 6 months. I just need you to sign those papers so I can release the funds. Please. Do it for us. I looked at the pawnshop receipt. I looked at the photo of my mother. The tears that had been threatening to fall since last night suddenly evaporated. The sadness was gone, burned away by a cold, white-hot fury. I forced my voice to wobble, playing the part of the broken victim one last time. I am just so scared. Gavin, I don't have anywhere to go. I know, he soothed, and I could hear the triumphant smirk in his voice. Just sign the papers. Tessa, I will take care of everything. Okay, I said. Send over the agreement. I will. Look at it. I hung up. I looked at Rowan. I am not signing that. I said, my voice steady. Good, Rowan replied, a faint, predatory smile touching his lips. Now let's get to work. The safe apartment was nothing like the cozy, cluttered home I had tried to build with Gavin. It was a steel and glass penthouse on the other side of the city, cold and clinical, currently buzzing with the energy of a war room. Rowan introduced me to the team he had assembled while I was still staring out the window, trying to process the fact that my entire life had been a lie. Tessa, this is Mara Quinn, our digital forensics lead, Rowan said, gesturing to a woman with sharp eyeliner typing furiously on a dual monitor setup. And Elliot Sen, forensic accounting. Elliot, a man with tired eyes and rolled-up shirt sleeves, did not look up from his spreadsheet. We have a problem, he muttered. Or rather, the Locks have a problem, and they are making it yours. Mara spun her chair around. First, the easy part. The unauthorized logins to your bank and email. They were not routed through a VPN or a proxy. The IP address resolves directly to the internal server at Lock Development, specifically, the terminal in Gavin's home office. He did it from the house I asked, feeling a fresh wave of nausea. Arrogance, Mara said with a grim smile. He thought you would be too broken to check. Elliot cleared his throat and projected a flow chart onto the wall. It looked like a tangled web of red lines. I have been digging into the Locke family charity. It is a classic slush fund. They take donations for urban youth development, filter the money through 3 shell companies, and then pay it out as consulting fees to a firm registered to Gavin. I stared at the numbers. They are stealing from charity. They are stealing from everyone. Elliot corrected. But here is the punchline. The Locke empire is insolvent. They are drowning in debt. The only thing keeping the lights on is a massive, low-interest liquidity loan from a private equity fund. He tapped a key, and a logo appeared on the screen. It was a stylized globe with a longitude line. "The Meridian Growth Portfolio," Rowan said, his voice quiet. "They are living off a loan from your grandfather's company. They are using your family's money to pay the lawyers they hired to destroy you." The irony tasted like ash in my mouth. Before I could respond, the encrypted phone Rowan gave me buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Do not trust anyone. Delete this number after reading." Then, an image loaded. It was a screenshot of an email chain dated 4 months before I met Gavin. The subject line read, "Target Acquisition T, Whitaker." Attached was a dossier on me, my foster history, my credit score, and the lack of living relatives. "Who sent this?" Rowan asked, leaning over my shoulder. "Sienna," I whispered. "Gavin's sister. The family hates her because she refused to marry for status." Another image came through. It was an invoice from a private investigator. The date proved it. Our accidental meeting at the coffee shop, where he spilled his latte and charmed his way into my life, had been billed to the family account. It cost them $2,000 to stage the start of our love story. "It was a job," I said, my voice shaking. "I was just a job application." "Look at your credit status," Mara said suddenly, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "They just updated the national database." I looked at the screen. Next to my name, in bright red letters, were the words, "Status deceased, incapacitated." "They killed me," I said. The shock was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "They marked me as dead so they could freeze my assets before the divorce is even final." "They are moving fast," Elliot noted. "I see transfers initiated 20 minutes ago. They are trying to drain the joint accounts before Monday morning." Rowan stood up and walked to the window. "They are rushing because they are terrified. They need you to sign that competency waiver to legitimize their control over the Meridian Trust. If you are incapacitated, Gavin gets power of attorney." He turned to me. "They want a public victory. They want to parade you at the gala tonight as the unstable ex-wife. So, we are going to give them exactly what they want." "What do you mean?" I asked. "We let them think they have won," Rowan said. "We lure them onto the stage, and then we turn the lights on." I understood. I picked up the phone. My hands were steady now. I opened a new email draft addressed to Dahlia Locke. Subject, "Please stop." "Dahlia, you win. I have no money, no home, and I am scared. I saw what you did to my accounts. Please, just let me go. I will come to the gala tonight and sign whatever you want. Just promise me you will leave me alone after this." I hit send. "Now," I said, looking at the team of strangers who were fighting for my life. "Let's get ready for a party." The ballroom of the Grand Crestmont Hotel smelled of expensive lilies and desperation. I walked onto the red carpet, not in the rags they probably hoped for, but in a simple, sharp black dress Rowan's team had procured for me. The flashbulbs popped in a rhythmic, blinding staccato. This was the Locke Family Charity Gala, the crown jewel of their social calendar, and tonight, it was supposed to be the stage for my public execution. Dahlia Locke glided toward me like a shark in silk. She opened her arms wide, performing for the live stream cameras positioned near the entrance. "Tessa, darling," she exclaimed, her voice pitched perfectly to convey forgiveness. She pulled me into a suffocating embrace. "We are so glad you decided to seek help. Family is about second chances." Then, she leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. The warmth vanished from her tone. Sign it. Then get out, she hissed. Make a scene, and I will make sure you spend the next 10 years in a ward. She pulled back, smiling beatifically for the photographers. Gavin was waiting a few steps behind her. He looked impeccable in his tuxedo, but up close, I could see the sheen of sweat on his upper lip. His left eye had a faint, nervous tick I had never seen before. I am glad you came, Tessa, Gavin said, offering me his arm. Let's get this over with. The notary is waiting right over there. He led me not to a private room, but to a designated table right in the center of the lobby, visible to every donor and journalist. They wanted witnesses. They wanted my surrender to be undeniable. The document was waiting. I sat down, picking up the pen. Dahlia hovered over my shoulder, her hand resting heavily on the back of my chair. I pretended to read the first page, but I already knew what it said. Admittance of paranoid delusions, voluntary waiver of all marital assets, consent to temporary guardianship. But then my eyes caught Clause 14. The undersigned acknowledges that no familial artifacts, specifically gold jewelry or heirlooms, were ever transferred to the custody of Dahlia Locke, and any claims of such are a fabrication of a distressed mind. My hand stopped. They were not just stealing my future, they were trying to erase the crime of stealing my mother's necklace. They wanted me to sign a lie that would bury the only link I had to my history. I set the pen down. I cannot sign this, I said, my voice clear enough to cut through the ambient chatter. Gavin froze. What did you say? I said no. I replied, standing up. I am not unstable, Gavin, and I am not a liar. Panic flared in his eyes. He grabbed my wrist, hard. His fingers dug into my skin, abandoning the gentle husband act entirely. You listen to me, Gavin snarled, forgetting the cameras, forgetting the crowd. You are going to sit down and let go of her. A deep voice rumbled. 2 men in dark suits materialized from the crowd. They were not hotel security. They were Rowan's people. One of them stepped between us, breaking Gavin's grip with a fluid by professional motion that sent my husband stumbling back. Sir, you are committing battery in front of 200 witnesses, the guard stated calmly. Step back. A hush fell over the room. The string quartet stopped playing. Every eye was on us. Gavin looked around, realizing his mask had slipped. He needed a distraction. He needed to regain control of the narrative immediately. He scrambled up the steps to the main stage, grabbing the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Gavin shouted, his voice cracking slightly. Please, ignore the disturbance. My wife she is having an episode, but we have wonderful news to share to prove our commitment to stability. I am proud to announce our new strategic partner. He gestured wildly to the massive LED screen behind him. The Locke Foundation is now fully backed by the Meridian Continuity Trust. It was a desperate lie, a gamble that the name alone would silence the room. The screen flickered to life. The Golden Globe logo of Meridian appeared, majestic and bright. Gavin smiled, thinking he had won. Then the screen flashed red. A jarring, dissonant alarm tone played over the speakers. The golden logo was slashed through with a jagged red line. Giant block letters scrolled across the display, projected 10 feet high for everyone to see. Flagged unauthorized disbursement. Recipient Locke Development Entities. Audit status fraudulent. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb having just detonated. Dahlia's face went the color of old ash. She gripped the edge of a champagne table to keep from collapsing. Gavin turned slowly to look at the screen, then back at me. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes, only confusion. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that had suddenly grown teeth and bitten him. He knew, in that terrifying moment of clarity, that this was not a technical glitch. What did you do? He mouthed, though no sound came out. I smoothed the front of my dress and met his gaze with a cold, steady stare. The consequences were finally being served. The red warning light from the giant screen bathed the ballroom in a hellish crimson glow. Before Gavin or Dahlia could stammer out an excuse, Rowan Pierce and Elliot Senn stepped onto the main floor. They did not look like party guests. They moved with the predatory focus of prosecutors entering a courtroom. Accepting funding from the Meridian Continuity Trust constitutes a binding agreement to immediate on-site compliance audits, Rowan announced, his voice projecting clearly without a microphone. And gentlemen, you are currently in breach. The shock in the room broke as a woman in the back stood up. I recognized her as an investigative journalist from the City Chronicle. She checked her phone, which seemed to be receiving data Rowan's team was leaking in real time. Mr. Locke, she called out, her tone sharp. Why are 80% of the charity's incoming donations categorized as miscellaneous consulting fees paid to a shell company registered in your name? The wealthy donors in the room, realizing their tax-deductible contributions had gone to fund Gavin's sports cars, began pulling out their phones. They were not calling their lawyers. They were hitting record. Gavin looked like a deer in headlights. That is proprietary information? We are buying her silence. Rowan interrupted. He held up his phone and pressed play, holding it near the journalist's microphone. Gavin's voice, recorded from our call earlier that day, echoed through the ballroom. Just sign the papers, Tessa. I will take care of everything. I will pay the rent for 6 months if you just sign. It did not sound like a husband helping a wife anymore. It sounded exactly like what it was, a bribe. Dahlia shrieked, her composure shattering completely. She is insane. She screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. Do not listen to her. She is a foster child we took in out of pity. She is having a psychotic break. No, Mother. A shaky voice cut through the noise. She is not. Sienna Locke, Gavin's younger sister, stepped out from behind a decorative pillar. She looked terrified, clutching a wireless microphone like a lifeline. She looked at me, then at her mother. I have the receipts, Sienna said, her voice trembling but gaining strength. My mother hired a private investigator to track Tessa 4 months before Gavin ever met her. The coffee shop meeting was staged. It was not a romance. It was a recruitment. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Dahlia looked at her daughter with pure hatred. You ungrateful little... Here is the timeline, Elliot said, projecting a new graphic onto the screen behind Gavin. At 9 o'clock this morning, Mrs. Whitaker was locked out of her accounts. By 11 o'clock, $300,000 was transferred from their joint holdings to an offshore account in the Caymans. This was not a divorce. It was a robbery. Dahlia lunged toward the AV technician booth. Cut the power, shut it down. I am the host of this event. The hotel manager stepped into her path, his face grim. I am afraid I cannot do that. Mrs. Locke, our system has received a fraud alert from the credit issuer. The accounts for this gala have been frozen effective immediately. We cannot serve any more champagne until the balance is settled. That was the final straw. The room erupted. Donors were shouting for refunds. I saw blue lights flashing against the ballroom windows. The City Financial Crimes Unit, tipped off by Rowan, was entering the lobby. Gavin was unraveling. He grabbed his mother's arm, shaking her. You said this was safe, Gavin shouted, forgetting the microphones were still live. You said he would cover us. You said the man on the Meridian board would handle the audit if we got the girl to sign. The room went deadly silent again. Gavin froze, realizing what he had just admitted. He had confirmed a conspiracy that went far above his head. Dahlia slapped him, a sharp crack that echoed in the silence. But it was too late. The police were already making their way through the crowd, handcuffs gleaming under the chandeliers. I turned away. I did not want to watch them be dragged out. The satisfaction I expected was there, but it was cold, heavy. Rowan placed a hand on my shoulder as he guided me toward the exit, away from the chaos. "Do not get too comfortable. Tessa," he said, his voice low and serious. "Gavin just confirmed what we feared. The locks are just the outer layer. They were pawns. The person who really wants to devour you is sitting on the top floor of the Meridian Tower." I looked back one last time. Gavin was crying as an officer read him his rights. He looked small. But Rowan was right. The monster was not the husband who betrayed me. It was the architect who designed the trap. It was 4 in the morning when the internet decided I was a monster. I was dozing on the couch in the safe apartment when Mara Quinn shook my shoulder. Her face was pale in the blue light of her monitors. "Do not panic," she said. Which is exactly what people say right before they show you something terrifying, but you need to see this. She turned the screen. A video was playing on a social media account that had been created in my name an hour ago. In the clip, I was sitting on a bed in a cheap motel room, holding a half-empty bottle of vodka. My hair was matted, my eyes wild. I made it all up. The digital version of me slurred, weeping sloppy tears. Gavin is a saint. I just wanted the money. I am so sick. I felt a physical blow to my gut. I touched my own face, feeling the disconnect between my skin and the pixelated nightmare on the screen. It was my voice. It was my face. But I had never been in that room. "It is not me," I whispered, nausea rising in my throat. "Mara, that is not me." "I know," Mara said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. She zoomed in on the eyes of the digital clone. "Look at the blink rate. It is off by a fraction of a second, and the lighting on the jawline does not match the lamp behind you. It is a deep fake, a very expensive one." "It does not matter if it is fake," Rowan said from the kitchen, where he was already on the phone. "It is effective. Gavin just filed for an emergency restraining order. He is using this video as evidence that you are mentally unstable and a threat to his safety. If the judge grants it, you will be barred from accessing any financial records or approaching the family. He is trying to lock me out of the discovery phase." I realized the fear was quickly turning into cold anger. He wants to stop us from finding where the money went. "Elliot, follow the money," Rowan commanded, hanging up his call. "I am filing an emergency injunction to force the platform to take this down. But we need to prove who paid for it. Now." Elliot Sin was already on it. 10 minutes of tense silence filled the room, broken only by the clacking of keys. "Got them," Elliot said, sitting back. The video was uploaded from a server farm in Eastern Europe, but the payment for the rendering job came from a firm called Northline Public Image, a nasty little PR agency known for scrubbing reputations. "And who paid Northline?" I asked. "A shell company called Blue Harbor Consultants," Elliot said, "which receives a monthly retainer of $50,000 from the Locke family charity. They used the money meant for orphans to pay for a digital hitman to assassinate my character," I said, my voice trembling with rage. My burner phone buzzed. It was Gavin. "Record it," Rowan signaled. I answered. "What more could you possibly take from me? Gavin, Tessa, please." Gavin sounded wrecked. He was crying, his breath hitching in a way that sounded pathetic rather than sad. I told them not to release the video. I just wanted you to sign the papers. I did not want to ruin your life. You killed me, Gavin," I said coldly. "You declared me dead in the system. You stole my mother's necklace. And now you are putting words in my mouth." "I had to," he sobbed. "Mom said. She said the person on the Meridian board will handle you if I didn't. She said he would crush us all if we let you get near the trust," who I pressed, gripping the phone. "Who is on the board?" "Gavin, I can't." The line went dead. Rowan looked at me. "We have enough. Grab your coat." He drove me not to a courthouse, but to the North Glass Pavilion, a private medical facility on the edge of the city. We bypassed the reception and went straight to a secure suite on the top floor. Sitting in a wheelchair by the window was the old man from the train station. He was clean-shaven now, wearing a silk robe, but the piercing blue eyes were the same. "Everett," I said. "Tessa." He replied. His voice was stronger than it had been at the station. "I see you survived the first wave. You knew." I accused him, walking closer. "You knew they would do this." I suspected. Everett Meridian said, "My family built an empire on foresight, but my grandson, he lacks vision. He only has ambition." "Your grandson," I asked. "Callum Vance." Everett spat the name out. "He sits on the board. He is the one protecting the locks. He wants me declared incompetent due to my age. And he wants you declared unstable so he can bypass the lineage requirements. If he controls the board, he controls $1.2 trillion. He reached into his robe pocket and pulled out another token. This one was different. It was solid gold and heavier than the first. The first token was an invitation. Everett said, pressing it into my hand. "This one is a weapon. It is a Meridian Gold token. It activates emergency proxy voting rights for direct descendants in the event of a hostile leadership dispute." "Why give this to me?" I asked. "I am just a risk analyst. I am nobody. You are the only person who stopped for a dying old man." Everett said softly. "That makes you more qualified than anyone in that boardroom." I looked at the heavy gold coin in my hand. The game had changed. I was no longer fighting a bitter divorce against a cruel mother-in-law. I was standing on the precipice of a corporate war, holding the nuclear launch codes. "They want to say I am crazy," I said, closing my fist around the token. "Fine. I will show them exactly how crazy I can get." The headquarters of Harrington Meridian was not designed for comfort. It was designed for intimidation. Rowan and I walked down a corridor that felt less like an office and more like a surgical theater. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass. The air was scrubbed of any scent, and the silence was heavy, sharp enough to cut skin. We entered the main conference room. The view of the city was dizzying, but the two people waiting for us were the real danger. Sitting at the head of the table was Callum Vance, Everett's nephew and the man currently trying to steal the throne. Beside him sat Leora Klein, the chief financial officer, a woman who looked like she was carved out of ice. "Ms. Whitaker," Callum said, not bothering to stand. He gestured to the massive screen on the wall, where the deepfake video of me drunkenly confessing was playing on a loop. "Muted. You have had a busy morning." "It is a fake," I said, my voice steady despite the nausea churning in my stomach. "And you know it. In this town, Tessa, perception is reality," Callum replied smoothly. "The market thinks you are unstable. The shareholders think you are a liability. And frankly, with your husband's restraining order filed an hour ago, the law agrees." Leora slid a thick document across the black glass table. The cover read, "Succession Lock Agreement. This requires a unanimous board vote to recognize any new beneficiary," Leora explained, her voice devoid of emotion. "Given the troubling circumstances regarding your mental health, the board cannot in good conscience grant you access to the Meridian assets. We are enacting a competency clause." I ignored the document and picked up the vendor list lying open next to Leora's tablet. I flipped to page 4. My finger traced the line I had suspected would be there. Lock Development, Data Infrastructure Consulting. Since when does a failing real estate firm handle data infrastructure for a trillion-dollar hedge fund? I asked, looking up. This is money laundering. You are funneling cash to Gavin's family to keep them afloat, and in exchange, they do your dirty work. Callum sighed, the sound of a man bored by details. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a check. He slid it across the table. I looked at the number. $50 million. "Walk away," Callum said softly. "Drop the lawsuit. Sign a statement admitting the claim was a misunderstanding caused by stress. You can disappear. You can start over anywhere in the world. No one has to know." I looked at the check. It was more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. It was freedom. It was safety. Then I looked at the deepfake video still playing behind him. I looked at the smug certainty in his eyes. He thought everyone had a price because he had sold his soul long ago. I picked up the check. The paper felt crisp. Then I ripped it in half, and then in half again. I do not need hush money, I said, letting the pieces flutter to the pristine floor. I need the truth. And I need what is mine. Callum's smile vanished. Then you will get nothing. We will bury you in litigation until you are old and gray. Suddenly, Rowan touched his earpiece. His face tightened. He looked at his tablet, where Elliot had sent a secure message. Tessa, Rowan said, his voice low. Elliot found the link. The payment for the deepfake did not just come from the Locke charity. There was a matching overpayment authorization in the Meridian system, approved 3 days ago. He turned the tablet to face Leora. By you, Ms. Klein, you authorized the funds that paid for the defamation of a beneficiary. Leora did not flinch, but her knuckles went white. That is speculative, Callum snapped, and irrelevant, because you have a bigger problem. Rowan looked at his phone, and for the first time, he looked rattled. He is right. The judge just fast-tracked Gavin's petition for the competency hearing. It is scheduled for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. My blood ran cold. The board vote to remove Everett is also at 9 o'clock. Exactly, Callum said, leaning back. If you are at the courthouse, you miss the vote, and we remove Everett for incapacity. If you come here to vote, you miss the hearing, and the judge grants Gavin guardianship by default because you failed to appear. Checkmate. They had split the battlefield. They knew I could not be in 2 places at once. We walked out of the office in silence. As soon as the elevator doors closed, I pulled out my burner phone. Who are you calling? Rowan asked. The only person left in that house who hates them as much as I do, I said. I dialed Sienna Locke. She picked up on the first ring. Sienna, I said. I need the data from Gavin's home server. The originals. I know you know the code. I do, Sienna whispered. Her voice was shaking, but there was steel in it. He destroyed my life, too. Tessa, tell me what to do. Get the drive, I commanded, and bring it to the courthouse tomorrow. I looked at Rowan. The numbers on the elevator panel ticked down. We are not choosing, I told him. I am going to appear in both places, not by magic, but by a legal maneuver they are too arrogant to see coming. The clock struck 9 in the morning, but I was not at the courthouse. Rowan was there, standing before the judge with a briefcase full of forensic evidence proving the post-nuptial agreement had been altered after I signed it. But the court did not need my physical body. They had my sworn video affidavit, filed under emergency protocol the night before. While Rowan fought the legal battle, Sienna Locke walked into the district attorney's office. She handed over a terabyte hard drive containing the raw emails from Gavin's home server. It had everything: the order for the deepfake video, the contract with Northline Public Image, and the smoking gun, a chain of overpayment approvals signed digitally by Leora Klein, leading directly back to Callum Vance. The update came to my phone as I stood in the elevator of the Meridian Tower. The judge had looked at the evidence of forgery in the malicious deepfake campaign and threw Gavin's petition out. He issued an immediate investigation into document fraud and placed a travel ban on Dahlia Locke. She was grounded. Meanwhile, on the 42nd floor, Callum Vance was smiling. He looked around the mahogany table at the board members. As the beneficiary is absent and clearly incapacitated, Callum announced, smoothing his tie, I move to vote for the immediate removal of Everett Meridian as chairman due to lack of competent succession. He thought he had won. He thought I was trapped in a witness box across town. I pushed the heavy glass doors open. Nay, I said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Callum spun around, his face draining of color. I walked to the head of the table and placed the Meridian gold token on the black glass. It made a heavy, authoritative sound. Beside it, I laid down the DNA results Rowan had expedited. Article 5 of the Trust, I stated, my voice steady and cold. In the event of a dispute regarding the founder's capacity, voting rights revert to the direct lineage heir. That is me. Elliot Senn did not wait for permission. He hijacked the boardroom display from his laptop in the corner, the screen filled with a complex web of transactions. This is the money trail, Elliot announced to the horrified board members. Vendor laundering through Locke Development, authorized by CFO Klein, used to fund a defamation campaign against the heir. Leora looked at Callum. Callum looked at the door, but security was already blocking it. I am exercising my proxy vote, I said, locking eyes with Callum. Motion to suspend Callum Vance and Leora Klein pending criminal investigation. Motion to freeze all vendor contracts associated with Locke entities. And motion to terminate the credit line for Locke Development immediately. The effect was instantaneous. Across the city, Gavin's phone began to light up with notifications he could not stop. His corporate accounts were locked. The loans keeping his construction projects alive were recalled. Dahlia was screaming in a lawyer's office as her credit cards were declined one by one. Their house of cards did not just fall, it incinerated. I walked out of the boardroom an hour later, leaving Callum screaming at the federal agents who had arrived to collect him. Down in the lobby, Gavin was waiting. He looked disheveled, frantic. His tuxedo from the night before rumpled. He ran up to me, ignoring the security guards. Tessa, please, he begged, grabbing my arm before the guard shoved him back. I didn't know. If I had known who you were, if I knew you were a Meridian. I stopped. I looked at the man I had once loved, the man who had tried to erase my existence for a payout. You do not need to know who I am to treat me with basic human decency. Gavin, I said, my voice as cold as the winter wind outside. You just need to be a decent person. And you chose not to be. Everett was restored to power. Callum and Leora were facing federal charges. The scholarship fund named after my mother was being moved to an independent trust, far away from the Locke's greedy hands. I stepped out the revolving doors into the cold December air. I wrapped my coat tighter, but for the first time in my life, I did not feel the chill. I felt free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.